welcome to another East County Voices. She's
upside down. Sorry.
everybody. Well, that was like, what the heck? Anyways, take it away, you guys.
Hi, Miss Patty.
Hi, happy Wednesday, you guys. So nice to see you all.
Hey.
Happy
What
Wednesday.
do we have? What do we have tonight, Miss Sarah?
Hi, behind the panel. What up? So what we're gonna do today is Franklin helped me produce a interview with the Center for Biological Diversity and Food and Water Watch. And so for everyone who watches tonight or joins us or watches later, this is important to Antioch for sure. This is a story about developers wanting to create a carbon waste pipeline through Solano County, Tideland area, and it will drastically affect Antioch. And then at the close of the show, Miriam Rahimi and I talked for a little bit, and she does a beautiful poem called Black Tea and Coffee. So what we'll do is there's going to be a video that we're going to play. It'll be myself interviewing the two people that I mentioned. One person will be off camera, so when she's speaking, you'll just see her name. And that'll be about 23 minutes. So hopefully people can listen because it will affect us here. But before that, if anybody wants to say how they're doing, how they're feeling.
I will say I'm very excited about the interview, which I heard parts of earlier today. And I'm also kind of like tripping on what this could mean for Antioch if this carbon waste pipeline does get put in and it happens to have a leak. We are in danger. We are in danger. And I also find it kind of hard to believe that this person, I forgot his name, but we'll learn more in the interview, can just buy this wetland area and then decide, I'm going to inject carbon waste here. Sorry about all you in the surrounding area, but this
spoiler alerts.
Yeah. So I'm very excited about this interview. I invited Tamisha, but I don't know if I have the right number. But hopefully Tamisha, the mayor, and the rest of the council will see this interview, because I don't know if they're aware about this. I was not aware about this until they reached out to ask if we can get this on the air on the podcast. So I'm very excited about this interview, the information that it brings, although it's scary and dangerous. I'm glad we're getting to hear about it because we may still be able to take some sort of action.
Okay. I have some thoughts. This is essentially climate justice. Yeah, we're talking climate justice tonight. And why is this important? Because we have one Earth, and it's pretty bad with our toxicity and everything we put. But the thing is, like, I don't know much about it, and so this is so important. So thank you all for bringing in this valuable information, because if it wasn't for, like you guys, and then I took a class at LMC, Los Menos College. It was a bio class, and we toured our beautiful delta. Our delta in Antioch is an estuary, and it's one of a few in the world. Estuary meaning like the fresh water meets the salt water, and it all works together because we live in an awesome ecosystem. We have different ecosystems, but the delta is unique. And I'm excited and sad to learn about this, but it's important because there's future generations ahead of us. It's not just us here in the now, but for nature and the repercussions to our communities. So thank you guys.
Yeah, and the delta is in danger from this. The water is in danger. So, yeah, I'm going to be glad to hear this interview again and see what we could do to try to prevent this. I don't know if it's too late or not, but hopefully we'll find out.
And then Carlos, what do you think? What you thinking?
I'm interested to know what's going to be said. Like you said, a lot of us didn't know, so I'm just can't wait to watch the video to see what's going on.
Yep.
You want to give us a little more introduction, honey, or ready to roll? I mean, Sarah.
No, I think we're ready to roll, and then we can have a discussion afterward.
Sounds good.
Okay. And
All right.
Carlos, I might cut it off a little bit early. No, we'll let it play. We'll play because there's a press conference. So that's another thing is, in Fairfield on September 9th, and they're going to talk about that as well. All right.
Okay, here we
Go
go.
ahead. Advisor with Food and Water Watch. Welcome. Welcome. Also, we have Victoria Bogdan Tejeda, staff attorney with the Center for Biological Diversity. Welcome to the both of you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much.
We're getting ahead of a September 9th press conference concerning a proposed carbon pipeline. And this press conference is going to be in Fairfield, California, but this is something that affects us all across the country. So do stay tuned. I'd like to start out, if one of you can talk to us a little bit about the collaboration between Bay Area residents and environmental organizations that are putting on this press conference and why.
Bay Area residents and health advocates, environmental advocates are coming together because Montezuma LLC is proposing a super dangerous and unnecessary 45-mile pipeline right near communities and sensitive wetlands, putting people and the really important wildlife there at risk while doing nothing to protect our climate from this project. And so this proposed pipeline infrastructure threatens our public health across the Bay Area, especially Contra Costa and Solana County. And so that's why, community groups, these frontline communities are coming together, just to stand up and address these concerns and, talk about why this project is so dangerous and why we should oppose it.
Tell us about what the carbon pipeline is.
Sure. So I can take that. What this is about is a technology called carbon capture and storage. And the premise of carbon capture and storage is to put equipment on a smokestack. So any of us who've driven by, a factory or a refinery or a power plant have seen the really tall smokestack where emissions go out into the air. And the idea is to put some equipment on there that will capture the carbon dioxide that is produced by whatever the industrial process is, to capture that, to compress it together, and then to transport that in a pipeline to an injection well, like how we have oil and gas wells, but this would be an injection well to dump the pollution waste. And while that may sound like a good idea, like wouldn't we rather put that underground than to have it released into the air? There are a whole host of problems with that. Mainly, this technology has been around for a long time, decades. It first was used in the 1970s, and now it's being iterated around the world. And it just doesn't live up to that promise of being a climate solution, first and foremost. So there's never been a project even proposed that would capture 100% of the emissions. And so then you have a project capturing some of the emissions, but the amount of energy to compress that carbon is tremendous. And so we're seeing projects proposed in California that would build a whole new gas-fired power plant just to compress the carbon. And then once it's compressed, as Isabel mentioned, it is a highly dangerous substance. This isn't the CO2 that you have in your fizzy beverages. This is industrial scale, mass amounts of CO2 that can suffocate people if there's a leak for miles around. So we're not talking if there's a pipeline rupture or a leak at the injection well, the impact lasting just feet. This can spread for miles and cause suffocation and other harms, including death. So there are a host of problems with this, and it essentially is all falling under a public subsidy that pays polluters to emit pollution. So it actually disincentivizes other ways of reducing climate harming emissions. And that's the project that is being proposed here in the Bay Area.
When we talk about having a new gas-fired power plant built just to do this, that sounds like it would have its own host of problems in and of itself. Where do they propose to build this? Here for the Solano Contra Costa area? Do they have that site? Do they have permissions?
So the new gas-fired power plant was for a project proposed in the Central Valley, but that was just an example of some of the impacts. What we know about this particular project is that there is a developer in Berkeley who has purchased private land in Solano County and is going to put the CO2 injection dumping well there. And so where does the CO2 or carbon dioxide come from? And in the permit applications, what we're seeing is that they're proposing to capture the pollution from different industrial sources along the Carquinez Strait. So that's in Contra Costa County, possibly on the north side of the bay. And to capture it, first of all, the one committed client so far, according to the permit application, is the PG&E gas-fired power plant in Antioch. And then to move that across the bay via pipeline to the injection well in Solano County.
And just to play devil's advocate, and you touched on it briefly, because the power plant, for example, is already there, because there are already a variety of different polluters all along the delta and the river where, in Antioch is where the Sacramento and the San Joaquin River meet. An amazing shipping channel, very, very deep channel, beautiful area. But because there are already a bunch of companies there, why would it not be a good idea to have them try something to capture some of that pollution?
Well, even if we don't know how they will power that compression, they will need energy for that. And so whether it is building new power plants or drawing more energy off of the grid that could drive up the electricity rates for local customers, that's a bad idea. And then maybe Isabel wants to talk about the dangers of the pipeline, especially what happens when you have a pipeline in or near a water source.
Yeah, a big portion of our concerns about this project have to do with public safety. As Victoria mentioned, CO2 is a very special chemical, and when it interacts with water, it becomes extremely corrosive. So when we're talking about a 45-mile pipeline underwater, the smallest amount of water can really be a huge risk to the infrastructure that protects the drinking water and the ecosystems and the communities that live nearby. And obviously humans always breathe some amount of carbon dioxide, but too much actually causes asphyxiation, disorientation, heart malfunction, and even in extreme exposures to CO2 can lead to death by asphyxiation. And so carbon dioxide, especially in open air, disperses. And because it is heavier than air, it flows along the landscape and expands. So it's not concentrated. It's not a concentrated gas explosion right at the side of a pipeline. It can go for miles and miles, the clouds of CO2, and can hang in the air for a long time. And another characteristic of CO2 is that it displaces oxygen, and that's what makes it an asphyxiant. And this is extremely important when it comes to public safety and emergency response, because combustion engines need oxygen to work. And we've seen this happen before in a case in Satartia, Mississippi, but the CO2 displaces the oxygen in the air and the cars stop running. So even emergency vehicles can't get to the scene on time. And then another important characteristic that makes this so concerning is that CO2 is odorless and colorless. So it's very, very hard to detect when a leak does occur.
And you mentioned Satartia, Mississippi. Can you tell us a little bit more about the background of that tragedy there?
Yes, in 2020, there was a devastating CO2 pipeline rupture in Satartia, Mississippi, a pretty small rural town. that led actually to the federal government deciding we needed to overhaul and update our federal pipeline regulations around CO2 transport. It ultimately caused a plume of CO2 to engulf the community. Within minutes, dozens of residents collapsed in their homes and vehicles. Like I mentioned, cars stalled, including emergency vehicles, trying to reach the scene. And it ended up hospitalizing 45 Satartia residents and forced a bit over 200 to evacuate their homes. And like I said, that's when Congress mandated that CO2 pipeline approval on the federal level be paused until they could update those safety regulations. And actually, in California, with the passing of our own law, SB 905 in 2022, California followed suit and put a moratorium on our own CO2 pipeline build out, all in response to this really disastrous leak that happened in Satartia, more rural town. And this leak happened in the day. Some of the emergency responders who were on the scene had mentioned that if this had taken place at night, we would have been dealing with a lot of more casualties and increased public health risks just because people would have been asleep in their homes. And like I said, the CO2 is odorless and colorless, and it would have been even worse than the incident that did occur and result in the overhaul of federal regulations that we currently have that have yet to be updated.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Victoria?
I think just to say that the public safety concerns are tremendous and huge, and there are concerns for rural areas where these projects are going in and concerns for densely populated areas. And with this particular project, the company has to model the spread of the CO2 plume that they inject underground. So CO2, if it leaks above ground, can spread for miles, but once you inject that waste, it also spreads for miles underground. And one particularly frightening and concerning thing that we've seen is in that model, it shows the plume spreading out from Solano County underneath the Carquinez Strait and reaching Antioch. And when it gets to Antioch, the actual model that we see in the permit application right now just has question marks on that line saying that their modeling doesn't know yet what would happen when that CO2 plume goes under Antioch, and that CO2 is buoyant. So if there's any conduit up to the surface, like a fault line, which we have a lot of, or any kind of well, or something else, then that's when you can have a leak, and that could put people at risk.
Just can't leave the water alone, right? And so, a lot of these environmental disasters often happen in areas where, people of color live, where we might not have as much money as other people. But this can disproportionately affect, again, the same, workers, those who, depend on the water for a living in so many ways, whether you work as a fisherman or on a ship or you're feeding your family. I see a lot of people out on that river all of that time, a lot. And it really hits home for me, but it should also hit home for people across the nation. I want to talk a little bit about Montezuma LLC because or Cacti, the coalition, calls them out specifically because they're the ones who want to build this pipeline. However, I was also reading about how Montezuma owns a significant portion of wetlands, and they were actually given, was it Measure AA funds, to take the dredging from a variety of places in California, like where areas needed to be dredged, I believe like the Oakland Port, for example, and take that and rebuild this whole, what had been a wetland. And their idea was that they could restore the tides and restore the wetlands a lot faster if they could just make it level again, because it had been so far underwater. And so when you read something like that, you think like, okay, it's like, an engineer's mind, ingenuity, meets restoration meets you had enough money to buy the land to begin with, and then the connections that you have with big companies who have this, dredging in and of itself is an issue, but we know that, humans seem to surpass animals many ways, and sea life, right? Like we must get through, commerce must get through. And so the idea is that they're putting all of this dredged soil, I'm assuming untested, just whatever it is, just dumping it to create this wetland. And that's one of the first things I'd heard about this particular company. What can you tell us about that particular project, if you know, right? And anything else you'd like us to know specifically about how that and the pipelines may or may not be connected?
Sure. So you are correct that this would be happening on the property owned by the developer, Jim Levine, who did wetlands restoration. And so I find it a bit bewildering that there was this wetlands restoration and now the property will be used for a waste dumping site. And in the permit application materials, and just to be clear, the project has to get a permit from the federal EPA, that's for the carbon injection well, and from Solano County, that's at the land use level where we would see some CEQA review at some point in the future. So in the permit review that we've seen so far, the developer is saying that the injection will take place a mile inland, a mile away from the wetland area. But in the yeah, and in the same area, we see Solano County has the area categorized as within the Sassoon Marsh Management Area. And there was a biological survey that showed that there are 8 special status wildlife species. So that means threatened or endangered or candidate species that are likely to occur in the area. 1 special status plant species, and then it's within the watershed area of the Delta Smelt. So, this isn't just a brownfield area. This is an area that has been important for wildlife and is near communities. So that's where this proposed dumping site will go, which is a tad bewildering.
And can anyone speak to some of these environmental organizations or bodies or that are funding or propelling or pushing for projects like things that Montezuma LLC is doing?
Sure, I can start, and then maybe Isabel, if you want to add on. So for this particular project, we saw information that the project is partnering with UC Berkeley and Lawrence Berkeley National Labs on some of the engineering pieces. And it becomes complicated because one may say, well, why would supposedly venerable institutions partner with a project that could be such a danger to the community? And it is, in our opinion, because this is billed as a climate solution when we've explained that it's not. And I work with scientists, and when I joined my organization, I talked a lot with those scientists about why carbon capture and storage is not a climate fix, and they've dug into the literature. And often we look at the United Nations climate body, abbreviated as the IPCC, and they come out every several years with recommendations for how to prevent the worst of the climate crisis. And they have modeled pathways, as they're called, to keep our climate crisis, below the 1.5 degree amount of warming temperature. So they have modeled pathways that do not include carbon capture and storage. And the way to achieve those pathways is to justly transition away from fossil fuels, to increase reliance on renewables, and to use things like natural carbon sequestration, so replenishing our soils, regenerating our grasslands, investing in our forests, not these mechanical means that use lots of energy that could cause vast devastation and that haven't been shown to prove out and to work. So I don't know if Isabel, you want to add anything to all of that.
Yeah, I guess I will just add and underscore the groups that, are concerned and the people who are making up the folks who are, most threatened by this project. And it is a lot of folks who live in Contra Costa and Solano County where the project is proposed. It's organizations like San Francisco Physicians for Social Responsibility, which represents healthcare workers who are extremely concerned about the public health risks, and environmental and conservation organizations, for example, San Francisco Baykeeper, who is extremely concerned about the risks to our precious waterway. Victoria mentioned, the importance of the delta and questioning the site for why would you propose this kind of project in such a critical ecosystem in our area. The wetlands are one of the largest wetlands that we have in North America. And this ecosystem is extremely critical to the well-being of our agriculture and our drinking water and multiple endangered species, as Victoria mentioned. But I do think it's important also to note that this project is extremely close to very populated communities. And because of the geological, what they look for in the geology of certain places to put the CO2 is cavernous areas that will be good for storing the CO2 underneath the ground. And unfortunately, this geology matches where oil and gas is often found. And so what we're seeing in the state of California is these projects being proposed in historically environmental justice communities that have already dealt with oil and gas drilling for the past decades. And we see this in the Montezuma project. This pipeline matches and goes along what we call the refinery corridor. So we mentioned the PG&E fractionated gas power plant, also the Chevron refinery in Richmond, and communities here have long been exposed to CO2 emissions and have been fighting the air pollution that has come from these fossil fuel facilities for so long already, and are now being inundated with these project proposals for a second wave of fossil fuel infrastructure that will just increase the risks that they're being exposed to.
What are some actual carbon pollution solutions? What could we be looking at instead of the so-called science of piping the carbon underground?
Sure. So we have the answers for this, and scientists around the world have agreed that we need to justly transition away from fossil fuels, and that includes fossil fuel energy generation. And we have the technologies. We have solar, which can be distributed locally in neighborhoods. It doesn't always have to be giant utility scale solar out in the desert. We have wind and other forms of power generation, and also, as I mentioned, the natural forms of carbon sequestration. And the challenges is that those are difficult. Those will require tough choices and changes in society, but the science tells us that those are the choices that we have to make, not prolong these existing polluting industries. And I mentioned before that what has made carbon capture and storage so popular in recent years is that there's a big public subsidy, and polluters get paid for every ton of CO2 that they inject into the ground, whether or not they inject it to store or whether or not they inject it to take more fossil fuels out of the ground. So right now, our incentives are in the entirely wrong place to move in the direction of the solutions that we need.
Thank you. So following the money as well, and knowing when actions are taking place in our area, because these things are literally happening in our sleep. And then, because there is a lot happening around us, sometimes we have to, have a hierarchy of like, well, what, first self-care first, right? But in that process of also protecting our own, making sure we have our basic needs met, right? And our shelter, also protecting the ground and the animals and our neighbors around us and the rivers and the trees, the rocks, everything that's so crucial to the fabric of keeping our vitality. and our peace, if you will. Please tell us more about the September 9th press conference.
Community members, Bay Area residents, homeowners, healthcare professionals are coming together to show the fossil fuel industry and our state leaders that we're not going to be silenced as dangerous carbon dumping and pipeline infrastructure is being proposed in our backyard. So on September 9th, we will be convening outside of the Solana County Board of Supervisors building to really show that we are standing up and not wanting Solana County to be used as this testing ground for this experimental project and dumping ground for fossil fuel pollution. And Solana County Board of Supervisors are one of the decision makers who will be deciding on permits for this project. And so we're going to use this as an opportunity to urge them to not let Montezuma LLC build this very dangerous pipeline in our backyards and reject all attempts to move these dumping projects forward here in Solana County and across the state. And we know what future we want, as Victoria mentioned, and what we can have. And we deserve a thriving, sustainable local economy that doesn't rely on refineries and pollution and extraction. And so that's really what that day is going to be about. And we're very excited to launch Cacti, or Communities Against Carbon Transport and Injection, on that day during this press conference. And you'll be able to hear from local residents who live right where this project is being proposed. You'll be able to hear from healthcare professionals speak about the public health risks that this project poses. And we're very excited that we'll be having this press conference and really just be demanding that our priority needs to be an immediate, community-driven, just transition away from fossil fuels.
Thank you. That's Isabel Penman from Food and Water Watch. Any closing words from Victoria? Victoria Bogdan Tejeda is from the Center for Biological Diversity.
I would say that now is the time to, if folks are concerned about this, talk to your local leaders, because a lot of local leaders we've encountered are hearing the industry talking points about carbon capture and storage, and often many times wanting to do the right thing. They want to do something about climate change, at least here in California. And so it's up to all of us to help educate them about what are real and what are false solutions to that. And carbon capture and storage is a false solution.
Thank you so much, both of you, for the work that you do. Sometimes it is hard to see through that false hope, and looking for solutions is not always easy. But we know that polluting in our own backyards, or the risk of not waking up, those are not options. Thank you so much for joining us on Flashpoints.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And bye for now. Bye, Sarah. Oh, wait, I'm still here.
Whoa, two Sarahs?
I love it. Can't get enough of it. That was cool. That was cool. Damn.
Well,
My
sorry.
mind is blown.
It's terrible information. I think that so forgive me. Yeah, I aired that this evening on Flashpoints KPFA, but I made sure to do video so that I had something for tonight. I noticed that Dr. Payton has joined us too. I'm not sure how much Dr. Payton got to hear, but I was thinking we could just go around for just overall thoughts and comments, and then any questions that anybody has.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Dr. Kimberly. Welcome. Where should we start? I took notes of some
NAACP on
things.
here, the president.
NAACP East County president.
I was like, the
Yeah.
president.
Hi.
Oh, a good president.
Hi.
Hello.
And
I think
go for it.
I'm glad to see everybody. I just want to say I'm glad to see everybody. It was a great presentation.
Yeah, I first that only happened because Frank found out, someone reached out to Frank about it, and then he recommended that I do the interview for Flashpoints. And it's so much deeper too. I put a few links in the studio chat. I'm not sure how to put them in the overall public chat, but the website for is Cacti Coalition. And I think that's kind of aptly named cacti too, because don't know, cacti absorb water and aren't nopales good for us? And there's some connection there, I'm sure. But in this process, the first thing that when Fred reached out to Frank, he said, "Hey, there's a press conference in your area, so if you all are free, maybe we can go. It's September 9th in Fairfield." And I think it's important for us to check in with our city council people and the mayor of how much they know or how much say they even have in this pipeline. And the Huffington Post has a great article that I linked, and it's about Satartia. It's spelled Satarti, Mississippi. And it's terrible, really. I was actually trying to reach the reporter who broke this information before. I believe he was working on this story before it leaked. This reporter now, Dan Ziegert, is no longer alive. I believe he died last year. But I've since then connected with a couple other reporters that have worked with the people of Satartia. And the thing with this pipeline, if you were hearing, was that the way that it works, it's not like if it just leaks, it leaks like where it's at. It can travel. And even in the modeling, right, it's in the permits for the project, there is a model that shows the plume traveling none other than to Antioch. And then as it gets to Antioch, there's question marks, as though the model is like, oh, and then we don't know what will happen. And so, hopefully we can connect with some people from Satartia. Apparently it's a very, very small town. And you can see from what I've heard so far, just talking to reporters kind of on the, I guess, off the record too, it's still a race and class crisis, right? Because of who it hit, how it hit. And when this carbon dioxide escapes, it sucks up all the oxygen. That's asphyxiation, but not just for humans, which is bad enough, but you're not going to get any vehicles. You're not going to be able to get in your car and take off because there's no oxygen for the vehicle, for the engine to run. Emergency vehicles can't get in because there's no oxygen for the emergency vehicles to run. Craziness. I know personally, I have a degree in environmental studies. I have not worked on climate stuff in so long, almost because it was too much. And because I work on so many other different things, but I'd like to start doing some sort of biweekly, presentation or what have you. Because there's just so much going on in the world. And I think that, gosh, what we have is our view, our water, our animals.
Yeah, big facts. Yeah. Save the environment. That's beautiful, but sad at the same time. But coverage and information and sharing the knowledge that's what we're here for. Absolutely. I have a couple thoughts I've noted for folks. Like, we all leave carbon footprints. So carbon monoxide, CO2, I always knew it was bad, but to that extent with the combination of the water, I'm no scientist. I sucked at science, but that's intense. We all leave carbon footprints with the garbage that we throw out, with the stuff that we bake and cook in the cars and the CO2. We all leave footprints on this earth. But then my question is, like, I have developer trauma. Like, when I hear developers, it brings me back to a lot of the information that Andrew Brecker has brought forward about developers in Antioch and how these businesses are done. And there's somebody with lots of money, they come through, purchase this big land, and there's they just do their thing if there's no say or oversight. And that's dangerous because is it going to be earthquake safe? What if there's an earthquake? Like, and then how long is that going to take? And the risk factors. You mentioned environmental disasters in Mississippi. I went to Biloxi, Mississippi, and I saw the remnants of what Hurricane Katrina left, but that had a lot to do with environmental justice too, with the levees being outdated, so much more. But geez, what if there's an earthquake? There's going to be an earthquake. That's inevitable. So to what level are they going to? And what's the benefit again? I missed the benefit. I didn't even catch a benefit of this. Please do tell.
So so there's already CO2 pollution, right? And so the idea is that there's already money getting paid to polluters for them to dump their waste, right?
Oh,
And then there is this, I guess I want to start back to, even though we mentioned it already too, it was pretty long. This private developer, engineer, he is actually working with UC Berkeley on this, but he actually bought a bunch of areas that were historically a wetland, but I believe they were like not level to the land. So he ended up getting contracts to move this dredge, because when you dredge and you get all this soil and all the pollution, all of that is in there, right? But we dredge because why? Because, the boats must get through, because, all kinds of reasons, and mainly to get through to to the other side, if you will. And so he created his own wetlands. He says, okay, he convinced people that if he can use all of this stuff that they were going to dredge anyway, and then just pile it all up to create a tideland and a wetland, he'd be essentially restoring the wetland even faster. Okay, well, now he's deciding that he can actually pipe the carbon. They can move. Basically, it's like a sewer for these companies, right? Like an underground sewer. This is where they can pipe their poison, right?
And
Not stop emitting carbon. Go ahead.
it's like not even a sewer, it's like a septic tank, because our sewer will flow to the water treatment plant, but it's like a septic tank where it just goes into the ground. And that's what's scary about it. And like the one of the women that you interviewed talked about, if it leaks, it could suck the air out of where you're at. That was kind of freaky to me, that the cars stopped working, people were getting short of breath, and people were coming to rescue them in vehicles, and because of the gas, the vehicles couldn't even function because there was no oxygen being able to go in and use. Internal combustion engines didn't function. So, I mean, that's kind of like a nightmare. If you ask me, you're over here dying, you can't breathe, the ambulance is on the way, they get near you, enter the cloud or whatever it is. It's invisible, it has no scent, but it's formed. And then all of a sudden the car stops working because they need oxygen to run an internal combustion engine. So it's like, oh my God. And this is the model that you mentioned, that the lady mentioned in the interview, showed the cloud going to Antioch, and with the question marks, what happens next? They didn't even have an answer. So I really, really hope we can get to our city officials, like the rest of you here. I'm not the scientist. That's why we had these guests. But from what they said, I'm a little freaked out about it, because if that thing comes our way, for one, we won't notice. If we're lucky, maybe we'll get an alert from the siren we heard today, the first Wednesday of the month. If that siren wails, what could you do? Shelter in place. It seems so senseless for another reason, a technology that doesn't really actually prevent carbon emissions, when the only way to do that is to get off fossil fuels and go more green technology. So it's like a useless technology that's endangering us.
Well,
And it's not really slowing carbon emissions. It's letting them pollute and saying, we'll take care of it by injecting it into the ground. Just keep letting us do it.
Well, the question was, what are the benefits too, right? Like I looked on Montezuma wetlands, like they say the economic benefits, excuse me. The Montezuma project has provided a reliable 24/7, 365 beneficial reuse option for Bay Area dredging projects for 15 years. Okay, you're going to dredge anyway. I'll take it because I need to rebuild this wetland that I bought and I own. As a pre-approved and environmentally friendly sediment option, use of the Montezuma site has accelerated permitting for dredging projects. So more dredging can occur because now there's a place that will take it. And contributing to the sustainability of the multi-billion-dollar economic engine that Bay Area ports provide for the region and the nation. And then those are literally what they list as their benefits to the first part of the project, right? And now this person is trying to pipe carbon waste through to a pipe. I also will have another map I want to show you because these projects are not just in California, not just in Mississippi. They are phenomenal and huge. There's like this one proposed like from New York down, I think to the south, where they wanted it to be like 4 feet high. It's pretty fascinating.
Now, I imagine
Well,
this
it's
is
a shame
flammable.
that people,
Sorry, Dr. Pippin, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I heard you mention like what happens, or maybe that was Frank. He that would need to shelter in place, but one of the things that's equally important to me is getting low-income communities to know the importance of not only this project, but how to survive and what even shelter in place means. So, like low-income families, the average families, they don't know what it means to shelter in place. They don't know if they have to shelter in place, how to survive in that setting. They don't know the importance of it because they're stuck in day-to-day survival. And those things to me are just as important as fighting this cause because you still have the human side of things where people need to know how to respond. And to me, that's just as sad because we talk about what could happen, but society would have a trouble responding as a whole. Like how many people do you know, Frank or Patty, that know how to shelter in place? How many people do you know that even own or have material to shelter in place? Like you're supposed to cover your windows, your vents. Um, to me, we just don't do enough to educate the mass public on what that means, especially low income families. Because if you have to choose over buying plastic or sustainable foods in case you have an emergency or living today, what's it going to be? Especially if you're living hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck. I'm just saying. I'm not trying to rain on the parade, but I'm just being realistic about the other side of the outcome. So I really appreciate your presentation. I just wish that we could do more as a community to realize that. And then I won't even think about what would happen to the unhoused population, like how much they take in because they're not equipped to even know how to ask questions. I'm just saying. Sorry.
That's so important. I mean, when I'm hearing you say, like, how do the people know to shelter in place? Like, at first I'm just like, what do you mean? I think, we got to give people more credit than that. But to be honest, when I hear shelter in place, like it never, ever even dawns on me that I'm supposed to seal my windows. What I think of when I think of shelter in place, right? I'm just being honest, but it's because it's been normalized where I live that we live by refineries, by PG&E, that, Dow, steel. It has been normalized that these things are going to happen, and you just kind of hope, and maybe we don't open our doors as much, right? And so I think that I'm not sure if shelter in place is the appropriate word for a toxic gas that's going to asphyxiate you to death. And if you survive, turn into like a toxic acid in your body. But I think that people have survived clearly. But I think that that's what we're taught, shelter in place. And I just thought it meant like, stay inside and maybe get your dog and cat inside. Really, really important conversations, because that's where us as a community can start to build these tools, because God knows. I thought I knew.
The county used to have those education programs. I mean, I remember a long time ago, we went to an event where they were actually giving away sheathing plastic, because that's what you're supposed to use. Um, and a lot of people didn't know that you're supposed to you're supposed to have this stuff. And I have it now in my garage. I have 2 big rolls. You're supposed to go to all your windows, double tape
Wow.
them from the inside so that no air. You know how PG&E comes around with an energy program to seal your windows? You're supposed to go on top of that from the inside, seal that up, seal off your vents, shut off your heating and air so that you're not bringing anything inside. So if you have central air, all those registers are supposed to be covered up. They talk about how to build your supply up of things to cook and eat and have sustainability for your food, of which after that happened, the market for that went crazy and started overcharging. So I'm just saying that there are things that people can do and not have to buy that, but who has talked to us about that? We don't know that.
No.
Lots people are just surviving. Like
That's
the
right.
average homeless person, if you're telling them, even if
That's
we
right.
don't have hurricanes, but earthquakes or the real need, if they need the shelter in place, where do they go? Like we don't
Mhm.
even have enough shelter space as it is. And we're busy throwing everybody off the street, but where do they go? I just did a meeting presentation to seniors, asking them in one of our NACP meetings, how many people know where your local shelter is? And only like 6 or 7 people knew. Those are just things that we need to be in the forefront about for so many
Do you mean like
years.
bomb shelter, or you mean like shelter for housing in general?
No, like sheltering if we have an earthquake or a storm
Okay,
or
yeah.
something
Yeah.
where they need to do that. Like if you, I'm gonna use you, Sarah. If let's just say you live with your elderly person or your parents live down the street, you're at work somewhere else. How do they know how to get there? How do you check on them? Did anybody make a plan in place? Not
Plans.
many families have that down. They don't they don't know that. They don't know to keep an extra supply of medicine just for a few days. These are things really important that meet kind of what the nation is. I'm just saying. Just saying.
Um,
Sorry.
yes. Shout out to Lift Up Contra Costa that they had a campaign of youth going out to inform communities about earthquake disasters and other things. So we have those few but powerful advocates in our communities. I think they made a small round last year, knocking on doors and informing folks about what to do in case of an earthquake. But this is different. This is it's not addressed. The city needs to really take this seriously. Otherwise, these lives and blood will be on their hands by not taking proactive and preventive measures that can be coordinated and planned out. This is one of those things that needs to get done. Like, you all are covering a lot of things. It's like, okay, so if, the elderly, the kids,
Yeah,
maybe the mom and dad's at home cooking or working and the kids are home.
that's right.
Ah,
The community,
What
those phone chains, at
and if
least.
the phone's out, is there a meeting place? Signals go down? Where are we going to meet in communities? There should be designated neighborhood, we have district leaders, right? They do what they can.
There's a website I put up, I didn't get a chance to read it, contracosta.ca.gov for emergencies. I know the fire department. I know there's these apps now, like emergency response apps. I'm sure there's got to be something other than Chevron that we can read about when it comes to like refinery blasts and stuff. to prepare for that. But the reality is we do live in these areas. Any
Mhm.
additional comments? Because we have a 5-minute poem to play at the end.
I just
Sorry.
put a link in there to shelter in place programs if anybody's interested.
Yay.
And I would just add that I'm glad we actually have a chance to maybe speak out about this. And they said there's going to be hearings or a time you could leave your statement. It sounds like Solano County, although it's on the border where it can affect us here in Contra Costa. So we will definitely do an update on this and go to the press conference and bring back more information about how to speak out. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye because there's people at the door and I got to say goodnight. But thank you so much for that interview, Sarah. It was so good. I was so excited to hear that and ready to like get on the ground and do something about this and let our electeds know, let our city
Make
council
some
know.
flyers.
Yeah.
Thanks, Frank. You're headed out. Okay. Cocoa Sustainable Farm, y'all. That's
And
another
then,
another nonprofit. Have y'all heard of them? Cocoa Sustainable. They farm for our community using wastewater in that corner in Martinez, and that'd be a good. I feel like Cocoa Sustainable Farm and Lift Up Contra Costa, our county supervisors, and then us continuing to raise it and lift it and talk about it and show up and get more info and shoot. This could be easy, quick flyer like, hey, press conference Solano. Those are our neighbors. That's our
September
community.
9th is the press conference in Fairfield for sure. And then we're going to play the video, this poem by one of our local poets. Anything else you'd like to add, Dr. Payton? No? Okay.
No, thank you so
Alright.
much.
As you mentioned, my name is Yasmin. I'm from Antioch,
Okay.
California. I am an event planner, an actor, a playwright, loosely labeled a poet. We're actually working on a play right now for a company called Monument Impact, and it is based on housing rights and immigration. Other than that, I have been writing for about a few years, and I've been introduced to poetry by Jose Cordon, who's actually Antioch's poet laureate and the founder of Grassroots Poetry. A little bit about myself is my background is Colombian and Afghan. My mom is Colombian. She spent some years there and between there and London before moving to Alameda at 16. And my dad is Afghan, and him and his parents and siblings came to America in the 90s. I realize that the older I get, the more I take pride in my background, and the more I want to write about how beautiful the two are, especially because the two are very harshly stereotyped, I would say. And so I kind of like to bring awareness of how loving and beautiful it is. So with this piece, it's called Black Tea and Coffee, and it goes like this. I'm showered by the culture of black tea and coffee, from birinj and sabzi to empanadas and ají, from warm taste of buñuelos, the Colombian kind, to spices of Afghan food that could bring vision to the blind. I'm showered by the culture of black tea and coffee. From chivas and fincas to masjids and pomegranate trees, I come from hakims and sharifas and Luz Maria Mendozas from Bogota streets. I'm showered by the culture of black tea and coffee. And I'm filled with love from both sides, with the softness of Nafasimodad and Jigarimodad, of Mi Vidas and Mi Preciosas, and nicknames of all kinds. I'm shown with fresh cut fruit brought to my room and of duas that I make at home on time. I'm showered by the culture of black tea and coffee, heard in the prayers told to me every night before I'd lay my head down to sleep. En el nombre del Padre, del Hijo, y del Espíritu Santos, Amen. And Allahumma bismika amutu wa ahya. I'm showered with the cultures of black tea and coffee. And I'm fueled by passion and pride, shown in lines of romantic poetry that can never be translated properly, so we don't even try. In the dancing of Atan and celebrating Eid and in seeing how high our kites can fly, in the way that these two cultures are so similar because we're both family-oriented, respectful, hardworking, and harshly stereotyped, in the way that despite everything we hold our heads and our flags up high, in the way I kill and die for mine and I know you would too. I'm showered by the culture of black tea and coffee, that have stained mosaic tiles to create different shades of brown that have been carefully placed together to create me. Thank you so much for listening.
Awesome. Bye, everyone. Joining us now are Isabel Penman. We heard that already. Thank you
That
so
was
much for
beautiful.
joining us. Yeah.
Sorry
Thanks for
about
playing
that.
that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's our show. Thank you, Sarah. Much love to you guys. Thank you, Don Carlos, and to
Thank you
those
guys so
listening.
much. Thank you, everybody that was listening and tuning in. And we're on every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Tune in next week and have a good night. God bless and peace.